I want to talk a little bit about the AMC, the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. Back in the late 2000s, Kendra James, young African-American mother, was pulled out of a car, and in the process of trying to pull her out of the car, she was shot, and as an end result, her life was lost. It was at that time that the Albina Ministerial Alliance began to bring together people across the community to talk about the injustice and what could be done about the accountability issues and reform, to formulate that and join together to talk about how do we bring about reform and accountability within our own police structure here in the city of Portland. Well, after the 2010 shooting and ending of officer-involved shooting that ended in the death of Aaron Campbell, where he was shot in the back by an AR-15 lethal round, we began to say that Dr. Haynes and myself, we had a conversation that we've gone as far as we could locally. And it was at that point that we could seem to get no district attorney cooperation, no city cooperation, that we then made a statement. I know the city of Portland says we asked for the investigation by the Department of Justice. And yes, they did ask for a criminal investigation into the civil rights in the Aaron Campbell case. They agreed, and all our constituents on the Hill of Capitol Hill agreed. But it was the AMC at that same press conference at North Precinct following then Commissioner Dan Salzman that I stated that we are calling for an investigation of patterns and practices into the Portland Police Bureau. And it was on that DOJ investigation began. Yes, they had to talk to the city and get the approval for them to come and do it. Once that settlement agreement was put into place, we then did file and became what is known as an enhanced amicus status, which is something no community group has been given before, and since that time has not been given, so we consider that a great milestone. The model that this settlement agreement is built upon is different than that of having a court-ordered monitor, where the court-ordered monitor reports directly back to the court. We have the community being involved along with the other parties to talk about what is good for the community. Sometimes when we're doing things, the powers that be tend to forget that they became the powers that be because the citizens made them the powers to be, because the citizens believed that they were going to represent them fairly and do what was at the best for them. We have come to learn, and sometimes we don't get that lesson learned, because at each other election following, we hear the same things of promises of what will be done, and then we get the same old soup warmed over again once they take the office. We don't see real change or transformation. Somehow we're going to have to bring about that change and transformation. So as we move forward, what's the experience like of being the coalition? Understand now, the coalition does not speak for the entire city of Portland. We do not speak for any or all of the ethnic hues, but we are a voice, and we are a group of about 25 or more different organizations that have come together around 5 principles, all based on the nonviolent principles as enhanced and taught by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We continue to do those. Some of the things we wanted is we want a special prosecutor in cases where there is officer-involved shootings. We also wanted to strengthen the IPR, the Independent Police Review Group, to have subpoena power, as well as to be able to bring officers in and help hold them accountable. We wanted the removal of what was known as the 48-hour rule, where an officer, once they had shot or were involved in using lethal force, had 48 hours to go and then come back and write their report. No such thing was given. I was told once that, well, if you're asked and you don't want to answer, then all you have to do is walk away. Yes, let a black man try to walk away from an officer and say, I don't want to talk to you right now. Then suddenly it escalates that you are, trying not to be arrested. And my life is a little bit more too precious for me for that to happen, and too precious for many of the others, not only African Americans, but those who are Latinos and Browns, and even those who are white as well. What happened to James Chassie is a tragedy. And still to this day, I don't know of an officer that has yet been held responsible or accountable for that. Every time and as an officer-involved shooting that results in death or in custody death, it is always justified by, I feared for my life. And so therefore, if I use those words, I am justified in using lethal force that can take a person's life. We want to, as part of one of our principles, see the Oregon legislature change that law so that it is to that of a reasonable person, not just because I feared for my life. Talk about the COAB, the Community Oversight Advisory Board, and why it was so important and why it is still important today. It's been now 116 days to my count since the COAB has been totally dismissed. The COAB was brought about, it was to have 5 citizens that would be selected at large, 5 persons, one from 5 supplied by the police.
As advisory members.
As advisory members.
The Commission on Disability, Human Rights Commission, each got one and got to choose another one.
And got to choose 3.
Got to choose 3, and then...
And then there was 5, one appointed by each of our city commissioners, and the contractor, the COCO, was responsible to the entire city commission, council, and not just one. So that was the 20 people that we had. It is important for a community to be able to share and to speak, because what happens is we do get media coverage, we do get others who talk, but there is more gain by having coffee, talking to individuals, and if individual citizens do not have an understanding of what's going on, or do not feel as if they are being heard when they talk about the things that are affecting them. When we talk about the amount of force that is being used, if today one person is pulled over and there is this quote-unquote suspicious list that's known as the gang list, and once you get put on that list, you get special treatment if they pull you over. It takes about 7 officers in cars to all surround 1 or 2 people to talk about what is happening. We saw in the Keaton Otis case, Keaton Otis was followed by 2 officers because the officer saw him driving with a hoodie on, that's a little sweatshirt with a hood on it, and said that, he can't drive that car. That car is too good for him to drive, so something has got to be wrong, and so they followed him. When he makes a turn and does not signal, now be truthful. How many of you have ever been behind a police officer and watched them make turns and they don't signal? They cut over on you. That's when I wish I had a siren that I could just blow them down, write them a ticket for, you didn't give me a signal within 100 feet and you didn't turn your signal on at all. So he was stopped because of that. And then over 21 bullets were fired. One of those bullets went from the scene all the way over to where the Radio Shack store was and went through the window there. It was said that Keaton Otis had a gun that was in the Crown Royal sack, and he shot an officer. Now, it's strange with all the modern technology we have that so far as I know, the bullet that was fired from the gun has not been identified. And I could be wrong, but I'm saying as far as I know. And as far as I know, they never found a gun in the car. but he's dead, so he can't tell the story. But we do know that he said to those who were passing by, please don't leave me, they're going to kill me. James J. Perez pulled over, asked for ID. Why did you pull him over? He is driving a car that does not fit the neighborhood. Now that officer insulted everybody who lived in St. John's, saying that if your car isn't clean and if your car isn't in nice condition, it shouldn't be in St. John's, because all folk in St. John's can drive are dirty cars and beat up cars. Can I take you all the way back to Tony Stevens to talk about the mentality? If you say don't choke them, smoke them, somebody is moved from, we're going to kill them either way. So since they tell us we can't choke them, let's just go out and shoot them. Until we have an officer who just a few weeks ago, leaving roll call, says, now, here's the joke of the day. Let's go out and shoot some black folk. Oh, none of you all laughed. It's not a laughing matter, but it shows the mentality of an officer, a mentality that is in our bureau. So as community citizens, this is what we're dealing with as we continue to move, and why we believe that the COAB needs to be reinstated to be able to give voice to the ordinary people, to give information, to question, make suggestions as to how this can be improved. We ask your support that when the council begins to look at this again, that they will go ahead and put this together. So the city is out of compliance because it has not held the COAB meetings. Now, when the COAB was having its issues and all of but one of the city council's appointees resigned, the city council refused to put anybody in place because they wanted to rechange and make the COAB something different. So they intentionally made the city stay in non-compliance. We want the Department of Justice to bring about accountability. You may have read that I said from the very first meeting that we had of a status conference when we were putting this together, I said to Judge Simon in federal court, it's in the record so you can go and check it, that he needed to keep a hammer, because whenever there is a problem, somebody has to drop the hammer on this. In the last status report conference, I again made a reference to the hammer, and the hammer needed to be dropped. Even though Judge Simon got credit for that quote, which he currently said, read the record and you'll see that it was Dr. Bethel who made that quote, I confessed it was me.
The reason for going into this much detail is because throughout this process, as I said earlier, there's opportunities for engagement. And as providers of mental health services, or as advocates for folks with mental health issues, you know, we need the city, the DOJ, really, you need to be a part of this process. We played a specific role by leveraging the legal system in a certain way, but a part of us using that system and part of us leveraging that system is to provide a space for people to interact with this settlement agreement and to give feedback about the settlement agreement and to understand the settlement agreement. And it's confusing and it's complicated, but it's incredibly important because it's impacting everyone in this room, and especially folks that y'all provide services and advocacy for. So the question is, what's the role of mental health providers in this process? And I think that everybody on this panel probably has different opinions, and Joanne also might have an opinion too. But I think a big part is that it's not, part of the settlement agreement relates to use of force and de-escalation and better training for engagement for people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. And there is a great deal of fear, at least I've heard, from folks in the community and folks who have mental health issues about engaging with the police because they fear force being used on them, or they just have fear. of engagement for a variety of reasons. And the purpose of the Community Oversight Advisory Board is they hold open meetings and they welcome people to come and hear about implementation of this agreement and provide feedback about how the city is doing, specifically the police bureau is doing in the trainings, in the de-escalation, in providing better responsive services to people who are in mental health crisis, rather than going straight to use of force or going straight to taking people into custody. And so if there are things that are working for your clients, or if there's things that are not, I think that the COAB provides a space and a place to hear that feedback. And otherwise, it's police officers' perspective about what works and what doesn't work, or it's city council members' experience or feedback or thoughts about what works and what doesn't work. But I think that there has been a great movement to require or to hear from those who are most impacted. And so I see the providers and the advocates as being able to facilitate people who are most impacted by police interactions to help them voice their concerns or their approval or their disapproval or whatever, to be able to facilitate that information to the city through the COAB or whatever entity that is there to receive that information. But the folks that are most impacted by police violence really need to be heard about how they are impacted and how they think that changes should and could be made. Because otherwise, it's people who don't have that lived experience deciding what is the best thing, and historically that has not worked.
So the AMA Coalition has a website and a listserv, and that is a very good way to stay connected with what's going on. And when there are opportunities for folks to come and provide testimony or share their stories, there's been a lot of flexibility in how stories can be shared via video, letters, and whatnot. So in your role as providers and advocates, if you're able to collect some of that information and share some of it with any interactions with the police, with reactions to things that people hear in the news or read about the settlement agreement, all of that is extremely helpful, and the AMA Coalition can help keep you connected on when that's going on. We hope and anticipate that there will be a third status conference in court this fall, and we hope that the community will be able to testify at that as well. And we've also had providers and advocates testify at those hearings on behalf of their patients and clients. So that's also another way to make those voices heard. I think that's probably the most important thing I can think of.
So in the absence of a COAB, the AMAC has organized, I think, two events thus far in that absence, in that vacuum, of community events for people to give feedback about the agreement. This is a community volunteer organization without the kind of infrastructure that the COAB did in fact have at the time when it was existing. But nonetheless, the AMA really values trying to get people's input, so held these two community forums to seek input and feedback from community members, and members of the COCL were there to provide information and answer questions and that sort of thing. So the question was about the first iteration of the COAB, lack of administrative support, lack of direction. How would we see the second one, this next iteration, being more successful?
We'll begin first with making sure that whoever wants to serve on this new COAB has read the settlement agreement, number one. Many folks said to us, yes, I've read the agreement, but we didn't double check that, and so a lot of them who got on there and no real clue what was contained in those 77 pages. Secondly, is going to be some training that trains them as to what they're to do, so they'll know about the laws, public meeting laws, and all those things that kept popping up at different times, that instead of being able to make a step forward, it kept pushing the COAB 2 steps backwards. When it got to the place where it was limited in terms of how the public could comment and speak at those meetings, it began to cause an issue. We're going to work through those things so that when this new COAB or COAB 2 comes out, it will have an opportunity for citizens to participate, for those who are serving to know that it takes more than 10 hours a month to be a part of COAB. It would take you almost 10 hours to read the 77-page report and gain some understanding. But then there's other things that come as people bring data. So we want to make sure that they have the necessary training for that. That number 3 or 4, where I forgot the count number, they need to have the administrative support, and that support be of such that it is going to be an enhancement and encouragement for them to do their work and not a detractor. That what I mean by that, it's hard to get information from the fox as to how to keep the fox out of the hen house, because the fox is not going to tell you the real truth. Will always have a door to get in to get a chicken whenever it wants one. So those types of things, so that this COAB is very well trained, that it is broad-based as well, and that we bring it back to the place where the citizens are more, for me, that there's much more citizen involvement, although all 20 were citizens, but being from the at-large community to be involved, to speak, as opposed to having so much that was on the other side.
It takes a lot of kind of focus. It takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And not everybody on the Community Oversight Board had the same opinions, right? So it takes the extra energy to engage with people in a respectful way. And, you know, we recognize that it's asking a lot of people. So part of it is, even if you're not on the COAB, support people that are. And how do you, ask them, what can I do to support you? And we realize that it is asking a lot of people to engage in this at this level. But quite honestly, it's important because the stakes are high. Everybody wants to go home safely. I do believe that. That's what, Dan Handelman, another member of our steering committee, says quite often. And as our chairs have said too, everybody wants to go home safely. Police want to go home safely. Community members want to go home safely. We all want everybody to get home safely to their families and to their homes. But we got to work at it because there are times when that is not happening, and that is not acceptable, and we all have the shared responsibility to make sure that it happens.
The forum that we held on Wednesday, there were members from the DOJ and the city present at the forum, and I told them that I think it was 148 days we wanted to see the COAB in place. That only gave them 14 more days. And so that's the urgency of the need of having this to come to pass. It's going to take some time, but we had the AMAC, DOJ, PPA, and the city. We'd sat down, we began in January, or even before that, to start talking about how do we replace people on the COAB and get this thing put together. We thought we had a good plan going, and then suddenly things changed. One of the first things that I mentioned to Judge Dominguez at the first meeting of the COAB at the library off of 122nd, I think I've got the right street over, when we started, was there is no provision to get and provide new members to the COAB. We need to start on this now. He agreed, but it never got started. When we got down to about 4 or 5 alternates left, we began to seriously start working on that. So it's been something we've been working on for a while. Would like to say, if I had my way, I'd like to see the COAB have been seated in January, but it didn't. But truly, by the end of this year, at the latest, I would like to see the COAB up and running, which meant they have had to have gone through all of the training to be ready to start towards the end of the year. The AMAC Coalition meets the first Thursday of every month. We start at 5 o'clock. We meet at Maranatha Church. That's on the corner of 13th and Skidmore. Little building there on the corner. Enter through the center doors. It's open. You're always welcome to come, hear the information, and give us input as well. We look forward to seeing you. We're on break for July and August. We're taking a vacation. But if anything comes up, we'll be back. But then the next time we'll come back will be first Thursday in September is our next scheduled meeting. We look forward to seeing as many of you as possible who come and be there. Let's continue to put our hands in each other's hands and demand to ensure that what needs to happen for persons with mental illnesses or perceived to have a mental illness is treated fairly. We no longer want families to post or to say, if your family member or your friend is in a mental health crisis, do not call the police. That's a bad statement. Bad statement, but yet it was carrying truth, because what was happening was not help, but death or injury. And we don't want to see that.